Greetings from West Union, West Virginia here in Doddridge County. While here we'll see places such as West Union, Smithburg, and Center Point. We'll also speak with Patty Harris, President of the Doddridge County Historical Society, and Renee Brown, Board Member of the Doddridge County Historical Society, and they'll both give us a detailed account of some of Doddridge County's history and culture.
In order to tell you about Doddridge County's history, we have to go back to a time when Doddridge County was Harrison County's history. In 1842, most of what we now know as West Union was a bustling little area called Lewisport. At that time, we were Harrison County, Virginia. One of the oldest places that we have here in town would be what is now J&J Flowers, and it was the Stagecoach stop, and it was owned by Nathan Davis. Across Middle Island and just east of Nathan B. Davis's Stagecoach Inn was another very active little inn that was called the BEE-HIVE, and it was named by J.H. Debar, who had come in on the stage. And upon arrival, he went into the little, then not known as the BEE-HIVE, but he went in to sit down to eat, and Ephraim B. and his wife had many children, blonde hair, blue eyes, running around the table, laughing, playing as young children would do. And J.H. Debar looked at them and he said, "I didn't realize I would be staying in a BEE-HIVE." And Ephraim B.'s little establishment was named the BEE-HIVE thereafter. And at that point, the most popular thing in town would have been, on the weekends, they would have the races. And this was a very popular thing going on. And even if court was being held in the courthouse, our friendly judge, who enjoyed the races just as much as the next person, would close down court for the day and go down and watch the races, and had been known to bid now and then on who was going to be the winner. After the races, about every Saturday night, the BEE-HIVE would become the social hotspot for the town, and everyone was drinking and merry and gay. But when one of the citizens would come in, this gentleman, and his name has been lost to time, but when he would come in, the people at the bar or at the tables would start chanting to him and begging him to play, bring out the banjo or the fiddle, and he always accommodated. And there would be dancing and leg tapping, and it was just a merry time. Everyone far and wide, they knew the BEE-HIVE. I'd like to also remind you that at that time, the ladies were not around the drinking. It was just not done. It wasn't proper. So at the Stagecoach Inn, owned by Nathan Davis, when the ladies got off the stage, they would enter through the front door. However, when the gentlemen would get off the stage, they would go to the right, and down in the basement was a bar, because they were tired and thirsty, and so they would do their drinking away from the view of the sweet innocent ladies of the
There were many, many very prominent people in the early years of Doddridge County. Nathan Davis, Lewis Maxwell. Along with those, one cannot leave out the name of Ephraim B. Ephraim B. was actually a legend in his own time, and has become even more so as the years have gone by. Ephraim B. was born in 1802 in New Jersey. He came with his family as a child to what is now Doddridge County, and he became a blacksmith by trade. He was essentially a blacksmith, but he was much more than that. He was a politician, he was a land speculator, he was a tanner, he was involved in the Underground Railroad. He was a man of all seasons, basically. One of his contributions important to the history of Doddridge County is that he was the one who produced in his blacksmith shop the hardware that was used for the covered bridge that spanned Middle Island Creek and was a prominent feature in Doddridge County. He was married twice, had a total of 17 children, so there are many, many of his descendants still in Doddridge County and throughout the world, no doubt. He was obviously a very intelligent man, but he was also sort of rough around the edges in some ways. He was in a contest, in a statewide contest, and was named for that year the ugliest man in the state of West Virginia. And he was very proud of this. He was awarded a pocket knife as an award for being the ugliest man in the state. And he was very, very unhappy when a couple of years later the state came around and said that they had found someone even uglier, and they took his pocket knife away. So that is part of the legend of Ephraim B. He was also someone who did not suffer fools. He did not like highfalutin ways, and he had sort of he agreed to disagree, let's say, with one of his contemporaries, J.H. Debar, who was a real man about town and highfalutin, if you will. And Debar had some sort of a private club that either Ephraim B. was not invited to join, or Ephraim B. decided that he didn't want to lower himself to be part of. And so he started his own organization called E-Campus-Vitus. He just made it up. It sounds Latin. No one knows what it means. But it was a secret organization, and it was mainly to poke fun at people who took themselves too seriously, because there were a lot of fraternal organizations at that time, and so Ephraim B. started his own fraternal organization, E-Campus-Vitus, ECV. This organization, somehow or other, although it was started here in Doddridge County, it sort of found its way outside of the county, outside of the state, and this being the days of the gold rush out west, found itself in the western states and became very, very popular among the miners in the western states, especially California. And so it sort of died out in West Virginia and in this part of the country, but it really took hold in California and in other western states. And it seems like it's only been in more recent years that the E-Campus-Vitus, the ECV in the western states, have recognized the importance of Ephraim B. as the founder of their organization. And it's not unusual now for us to have visitors from California, clampers, who are basically making a pilgrimage to the home of their founder, and it's part of the tour that they take, because we show them Ephraim's old stomping grounds, but we also go to his place of burial. We go to his cemetery, and it's a point of pride that these clampers can now stand beside the monument at Ephraim B.'s grave and be photographed by it. There's also a legend that says that the tree, there's a large tree that is growing very near Ephraim's grave, and there's a legend that the roots from that tree have gone down into the ground and gone and penetrated into Ephraim B.'s casket, and has extracted the essence of Ephraim B. into its sap and into the leaves. And legend has it that if you were to take a leaf from that tree, that will contain in some ways, some DNA of Ephraim B. And so this is something else that that clampers and other believers latch onto and treasure in many ways.
A short time after this period, Lewisport and just west across Middle Island was another little community called Union. Now, there was a little bit of competition, shall we say, for the economic progress of the two areas, and there was a little bit of undercurrent between the two. However, after a few years of this, the community got together and decided that they wanted to put this all to an end for the betterment of the area, and they decided to join. So they had to come up with a name. Union, which was east of the stream there, was not going to consume Lewisport, and Lewisport have nothing to say. So they decided to come up with a name called West Union, because Union was on the east side, Lewisport on the west, so you merge and you come up with the west of Union, and you would get West Union.
Well, West Union was, of course, the focal point of the county at its founding, but there was another settlement in the southern part of the county that was important in other ways. It was a little town called St. Clara, which was founded by J.H. Debar, who was a Renaissance man of his times. He was a land speculator, he was an artist, he was an author, he was everything to everyone. And he founded this little settlement and used it as a draw to bring other people to this country. He himself was a Frenchman, and he probably had some sort of a financial stake in it, I'm not really sure, but he was able to bring a large number of people to Doddridge County by advertising this little idyllic settlement, St. Clara. And people came from Germany mainly, and Switzerland, and it was mainly German-speaking people, and they came to St. Clara, they farmed, they were the mainstay of that part of the county. And their descendants are still very, very plentiful in the county.
In regard to J.H. Debar's personal life, tradition tells us, we cannot document it as fact, but tradition tells us that he met his first wife, Clara, in France, and her family was quite disturbed about their affections for each other, so much so that they boarded a boat and moved her to America to get away from him. He was so distraught after they left that he decided to follow them. And he did follow them to Cincinnati. He met up with them there, and he did marry her. She became pregnant and during childbirth died. I believe her age was somewhere in the line of 14 years old. And after her death, he gave the son, which is the son that was born, to her parents, and they took the baby back to Cincinnati where they lived. The child was born in Parkersburg, West Virginia in Wood County. She went to Cincinnati with her husband and took the grandchild. He moved east toward Doddridge County, and he was speculating for land. And that is where Renee took up the rest of the story, and he remarried and had several children after that at St. Clair. One of Doddridge County's proudest contributions to the state would have to be J.H. Debar, who lived out at St. Clara. He submitted, among many others, what he thought was an appropriate depiction of what the West Virginia state seal should look like. And a committee that was appointed by the legislature chose his design to become the state seal. Now, he designed what they call the Great West Virginia Seal, which we see everywhere. But he also, on the reverse side of that, designed what is called the lesser seal. And the great seal, which was the front, was actually a depiction of a miner representing the coal in West Virginia and a farmer representing West Virginia's proud agriculture. And the farmer happened to be a neighbor by a man by the name of Schmidt. And the miner was also another one of his friends. On the back of the seal, he wanted to take in the farming. That's why you see the sheep in the foreground. And it did more than just paint a picture. It told a story of what made West Virginia great and unique. We're very proud of it. Another location in West Union that was a historic landmark that unfortunately is now gone. It was torn down to make way for our medical center, and that is the Grant House. It was a hotel, a 3-story hotel for our small town. That was quite something. And President Grover Cleveland spent the night there. We have the logbook that has his signature, and also President Harrison stayed there a night. President Harrison and Grover Cleveland signed their names and then simply put Washington. There was no D.C., it was just Washington at the time. And his entourage, you could see 3 or 4 of his other members of the party. We know that is so because they also signed Washington as their place of residence. Another small town that is nearby is Smithburg, West Virginia, and it was originally called Smithton. It was named after a gentleman by the name of Francis Marion Franklin Smith and his wife Julia Smith. She was a Neely by maiden name. And for quite some time it was a very busy, bustling little community. It had its own depot, it had a tannery, general store, the basic makeup of most small communities. It had its small school. It actually had multiple rooms, which was rare for the time. It had several churches, 3 or 4 churches, but it rivaled West Union, which was then Lewisport. And it was a toss-up as to which community was actually going to come out on top in the Commerce Department. Then in later time, as we know, the courthouse and county seat became what is now known as West Union, and Smithburg kind of fell back in the economy and commerce department. Some of the most important pre-Civil War history that Doddridge County can speak of would have to be Jaco's Tavern. That's just west of West Union, just a little over a mile from town. And there, Luke Jaco ran a little tavern. In the front, it would look like any normal little tavern that was popular at the time. But unknown to most people, during the dark of night, he would help to provide sanctuary to the slaves that were coming up from the south, moving to the north to get into Canada and to freedom. And this little area was a cave that was on his property that sits just northeast of where his tavern is, and it's still there today. He had been known to be shot for his belief in the freedom of the blacks who were coming up. This area was quite leaning more toward the north, but there were some who felt, as the Confederates did. So many a black slave spent their nights in this little cave that used to be a 2-room area, and you could actually go in. I've been in it. One of those rooms are still accessible. The one that is back beyond the first entry is now collapsed. It collapsed during the interstate construction. When they were blasting, it caused those rocks to shift and it closed off. An Indian body was found there some years ago, and they thought that it might be some either a slave that was trying to get out and who had died, or maybe there had been a crime committed, but they did a full investigation and said that it was a Native American skeleton. When we think about the Civil War, we have to take into consideration the B&O Railroad was a significant part of that strategic area. Doddridge County and West Virginia as a whole was not involved in a lot of the major battles throughout the war, but we did have many of the skirmishes in an effort to gain control of the railroad with both the Union and the Confederates, because both sides knew to control the railroad was to control the outcome of the war. The Union depended on the B&O Railroad to bring troops in from the west, as well as fresh horses, food supplies, any number of things that they needed, weapons. A lot of the outcome was going to depend on the resources that they could refurnish from the west. So we ended up here in Doddridge County becoming involved in several skirmishes, and the most noteworthy would have been the Jones and Bowdoin raid that came through. And there was 2,500 cavalrymen who came in to raid and do as much havoc as they could on the railroad. They managed to come into Smithburg, and they burned the east trestle, and they tried to fight them off, the Union did, but they just were not any match for the sheer volume of this raiding. Then advanced on to west of that to what they called the western trestle, and they managed to succeed in burning that one. Then they decided they would come down and they would try to burn the trestle here at West Union, which is just a short distance away. However, they didn't count on the blockhouse that was built and fortified. They had only one cannon, but they had some very long-range muskets, and they were very accurate, and they held them off. And after some time of skirmishing from one up and the other one down, the Confederates decided that it was not worth the effort, and they retreated, and they diverted their route and went on to create havoc in Clara. When it comes to the industrial era in Doddridge County, the most prominent that would come to mind would be the oil and gas industry. It spawned or fostered the economic growth and the branching out of other industry. The first well was drilled here in 1892, and it was at Center Point, just northwest of Center Point. It was the Sullivan #1. It would belong to the heirs. And then in a couple of years later, there was another well that was drilled, and it hit very big in Sedalia. And that brought on what we now know as the oil and gas boom that hit Doddridge County. And it gave way to the opening of restaurants, cleaners, boarding houses, a glass factory, a brick factory, just numerous other small businesses. The cross ties that were needed fostered the timber, the lumber industry here. There was food to be prepared for these pipeliners and drillers, and therefore it boosted the agriculture, the beef industry in the area, and the money that was made by the owners of these areas, businesses, allowed for banks to prosper. It just provided so much growth that the county would not have had it not been for the oil and gas. There was another industry that benefited from the oil and gas in Smithburg, and it was carbon factories. There were 4 of them at one time located up there, and they manufactured carbon black, which was used in paint. It was used in crayons and for making rubber tires. Anytime that a black pigment was needed, it was often from the carbon black. Central Station, which is located just northwest of West Union, took its place in our local history on the fall of 1915 when a family group made its way to Central Station and waited for the train to stop to take on water. And while it was taking on water, they boarded the train unbeknownst to any of the workers there, and they waited for the train to pull out of Central Station, and it went on past the Greenwood area, and somewhere after that they overcome the engineer and actually robbed the train. They got away with $300,000, which at that time in 1915 was a great deal of money. They were last known to be in the Parkersburg area, and they got away with the $300,000 and made their way west. A young Duckworth girl that was from Greenwood had seen them in the vicinity, and when they were finally apprehended and brought before the court, because the young Duckworth girl had given her testimony as to having seen them, and the fact that they found them with a large amount of the money still in their possession, it ended up being a strong conviction, and they were sent to jail for that. One of the most memorable, if you want to use that word, events that happened in our county was on June the 25th of 1950. There had been a ball game at the field, a baseball game, and everyone had been out. It had been an overcast day. The clouds were getting darker, that you could hear the rumble in the background, but no one really took a lot of note of it. All afternoon it did that, and then about 11 o'clock that night, the clouds opened up and the rains came, and they poured and they poured and they did not stop. And people were out warning other neighbors that the waters were rising, and all of a sudden the hills, the tributaries, the runoffs came down at an unbelievable speed and depth and emptied into Middle Island, causing Middle Island to come downstream more like a wall than water. And it was knocking out everything in its path. It was taking out trees. It was just lifting houses like small boats and moving them downstream and hitting the trestles, the train trestles that crossed. And as they would hit an impact, you could hear the screams of the families as they perished into the water. And there were some 18 lives that were lost that night. And during that night, we awoke the next morning to the great loss to the town, which was our old covered bridge that was built in 1842. It was designed by the same man who designed the Philippi Bridge that now stands. It was such a significant piece to our community that it's on our city's seal, and after all of these years it is still spoken of in reverence. It's a point of pride for everyone. And we have a gavel from our judge in town that was made from part of the studding from that bridge. That would be another implication to how much it meant to the people. The Doddridge County Historical Society was actually the brainchild of Dr. Alton Childers. During the bicentennial era, the Bicentennial Committee had picked up a log school that was between Slaughter Run and Nutter's Fort, north in Doddridge County, and they moved it to the Doddridge County Park and they restored it. And after that was done and the bicentennial was over, they basically formed the Doddridge County Historical Society, and the Bicentennial Committee that was the first project of the Doddridge County Historical Society. And from that moment, the Historical Society grew. Its numbers reached at one point nearly 200 members. One of the larger contributions that the Historical Society did after Hickory Ridge would have been the Centerpoint Bridge, which is in Center Point. It fell on disrepair. It had operated up until the 1940s as an operational bridge. Then the wood became rotten that was pulling away from the frame, but the foundation structure was strong. So the Historical Society took the bridge, and through volunteers and many, many man-hours, they restored it and painted it, and it is what you would see today. Other than that, we also was given through the school board for $1 the Krenn school located out at St. Clair, and we have it really needed very little repair. It was painted and turned over to that community. They use it today for a community building. We still have possession of it, and it's under our umbrella, but we leave it as a thriving operational building at this point. And the Smithburg Depot would have to be another jewel that we have managed to grasp away from the hands of time. You know, it's restored to its original paint color. We took chips that would let the paint companies know exactly the colors that it was. So it sits today fully restored and in the exact condition that it was when it was created back in 1857. It was put there as a standard depot. A lot of the small areas along the rail that went from Grafton to Parkersburg really had a stamped depot. If you went into one, you pretty much saw them all. But Doddridge County has only the one depot surviving, and we're really proud of that. Doddridge County has been given the opportunity through the new oil and gas boom that is coming, much like the turn of the century oil and gas boom. We've been given a lift economically, so to speak. Small businesses are cropping up. You can see the restaurants, the shops. We have an antique shop. We have 2 doctors' offices. We have so many areas that have been revitalized. Not to say they were dead, but they were in need of being revitalized. And so, though when you talk to the residents in the area, you'll get some that will be with a positive note when they discuss it, and you will find residents who are distraught, and there are the levels all in between. But the one thing we can't deny is that it has given Doddridge County the financial ability to lift itself up. And if we can plan for what we can do when the oil and gas is gone, because it will be gone, but if we can use the money and the finances to make us grow into something that will sustain us through the years to come, I think that history will write that it was a very positive thing that come to our county.